Notification came at 6:47 in the morning while I was still in my robe, halfway through my first cup of coffee and a contract I'd been reviewing since before sunrise. It was a text from my brother, not a call, a text. After 3 years of absolute silence. Hey, Mom and Dad are in town. They want to see the place. We're outside. I read it 3 times. Then I set my mug down very carefully because I knew if I didn't do something deliberate with my hands, I was going to throw it. We're outside, like they'd just swung by after running errands, like the last 3 years hadn't happened, like my father hadn't stood in my old apartment doorway and told me I was an embarrassment to the family because I'd turned down the job he'd arranged for me at his friend's insurance firm and taken a junior analyst position at a startup he'd never heard of. Like my mother hadn't backed him up. Like my brother hadn't sat there on their couch saying nothing while my father told me that if I was going to make that choice, I could make all my choices alone from now on. I hadn't spoken to any of them since. That was 3 years ago. I was 26. I had $11,000 in savings, a studio apartment with one window that faced a parking garage, and a job that paid me $54,000 a year to do work I actually believed in. My father called that throwing my life away. He'd stopped calling it anything at all after about 2 weeks, because he'd stopped calling entirely. Now they were outside. I lived in a 2-bedroom condo on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown Atlanta. I bought it 18 months ago. I had a parking space in the garage below, a doorman named Gerald who remembered my coffee order, and a view of the city that still made me stop sometimes when I came home late, and the lights were all on below. I also had, as of about 4 months prior, a business I'd co-founded that had just closed its Series A at $8 million. I don't say any of that to brag. I say it because it matters for what comes next. I put my phone face down on the counter and stood there for a moment. My first instinct was to call Gerald and have him tell them I wasn't home. My second instinct was to call my attorney, which tells you something about where my head was. My third instinct, the one I went with, was to take a breath, walk to the intercom and buzz them up myself. Because I wanted to hear what they had to say. I wanted to see what this looked like up close. They walked in like they owned the place. That's the only way I can describe it. My father had his hands in his coat pockets, looking around at the ceilings and the floors and the kitchen island like he was assessing square footage. My mother was doing that thing she does, where she doesn't fully commit to an expression, somewhere between pleased and uncertain, like she hadn't decided yet how to feel about the situation. My brother followed behind them. He was 32, 3 years older than me. He didn't meet my eyes. "This is nice," my father said. He didn't say hello. "Thank you," I said. My mother hugged me. It was the kind of hug that lasts exactly 1 second longer than it should, the kind that's trying to accomplish something. "It's so good to see you, sweetheart. You look thin." I wasn't thin, but okay. We sat down. I didn't offer coffee. I'd thought about it on the elevator ride. Whether to offer coffee, whether to put out anything on the counter, whether to make this feel like a visit. And I'd decided no. This wasn't a visit. Something had brought them here, and I wanted to find out what it was before I started pouring anything. My father sat across from me in the armchair I'd bought at an estate sale in Decatur, the one that had taken me 4 trips in a borrowed truck to get upstairs. He looked at me the same way he'd looked at the ceilings. Measuring. "Your brother has a situation," he said. There it was. I looked at my brother. He was sitting on the far end of the couch, still not looking at me, turning his phone over and over in his hands. He'd always done that when he was nervous. I used to think it was endearing. Now it just made me tired. "What kind of situation?" I asked. My father leaned forward. "He got into some business trouble. The restaurant didn't make it. You know how it is. The market's brutal right now. Inflation, supply chain, everything went up. He owes about $60,000 to a private lender. The interest rate is not good. The situation is becoming urgent." I waited. "We've already put in what we can," he continued. We refinanced the house 2 years ago and we're at our limit. But you, he gestured around at my apartment the way you gesture at evidence, you're clearly doing well. We thought maybe we could work something out. My mother put her hand on my knee. We know it's been a long time, and we know things were left in a bad place. But family is family. Family is family. I'd thought about what I would say if this moment ever came. I'd thought about it a lot, actually, in the early months after the silence started, lying awake in my studio apartment with the parking garage light coming through the curtain. I'd run through speeches, whole paragraphs, devastating ones, where I was calm and precise and said everything I'd always wanted to say, messy ones, where I cried and said things I'd regret, quiet ones, where I just told them to leave. But sitting there, in my own home, in the chair I'd bought with my own money, with the city I'd built a life in spread out behind me, I didn't feel any of the things I'd felt in those late nights. I just felt very, very clear. I have some questions, I said, before we talk about anything else. My father nodded like I was being reasonable and cooperative. He thought the questions were going to be about logistics. They weren't. 3 years ago, I said, when I moved out and took the analyst job, you told me I was on my own. You said, and I'm going to quote this because I wrote it down, don't expect anything from us if you're going to be this selfish. I want to make sure we're all remembering that correctly. Silence. I also want to ask about my college fund. I looked at my mother. Grandma left me $22,000 when she passed. You told me it had been put into a college account in my name. When I asked about it sophomore year, you said it had been used for family expenses. I'd like to know what expenses. My mother's hand came off my knee. That was a long time ago, my father said. His tone had shifted slightly. Not defensive. Not yet, but recalibrated. That money went to keeping the household running. You benefited from that too. I was 15, I said. I wasn't consulted. You're really going to bring that up now? I'm bringing it up because you came here to ask me for money, I said. I think the financial history of this family is relevant context. My brother finally looked up. Look, I know this is awkward. It's not awkward, I said. Awkward is running into someone at a party. This is something else. He looked back down at his phone. I took a breath. This was the moment I'd planned for, the one I'd had a week to think about after I'd gotten a call. Not from my family, but from a mutual acquaintance who told me my brother's restaurant had closed and that he was in serious debt. I'd had a week to decide what I wanted to do with that information before my family decided to show up on my doorstep. A week to make some calls of my own. I stood up. Give me a few minutes. I went to my home office, which used to be the second bedroom, until I'd put in a desk and a whiteboard and a filing cabinet that I actually used. I closed the door. I sat down. I opened my laptop. 3 days earlier, I had contacted the private lender my brother owed money to, a short-term business loan company based in Florida. I'd done it through my attorney, framing it as a potential debt purchase inquiry. It's not an uncommon thing. Lenders sometimes prefer immediate liquidity over the long process of collecting from a struggling borrower. We'd gone back and forth. They'd come down, I'd come up. We'd landed somewhere in the middle. That morning, the same morning my brother texted me, I had wired the funds to complete the purchase. I was now my brother's creditor. He didn't know that. None of them did. I sat at my desk for a few minutes. Not because I needed to do anything, but because I needed the pause. I needed to be certain about what I was about to do and why I was doing it. Not out of anger. I'd worked through most of the anger in therapy 2 years ago with a very patient woman who charged me $175 a session and was worth every penny. Not out of cruelty. Because what my family was offering me was a transaction dressed up as reconciliation, and I believed in honest transactions. I printed 2 documents. I put them in a plain folder. I went back to the living room. My father was standing at the window when I came out, looking at the city below. My mother was checking her phone. My brother hadn't moved. I set the folder on the coffee table. I sat down. I want to tell you something first, I said, and I need you to actually listen. My father turned from the window. He sat down. When I took that job 3 years ago, I knew you were disappointed. I understood that. What I didn't understand, what I couldn't understand at the time, was why my choices about my own life meant that you got to disappear from it. I needed you, not your approval. You. And none of you were there. I looked at my brother, including you. Nobody said anything. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, I continued. I'm saying it because if we're going to have a real conversation today, I need that to be acknowledged, not explained away, not justified, just acknowledged. My mother looked like she was about to cry. My father looked like he was trying to figure out where this was going. Okay, my father said slowly. I hear you, and maybe we could have handled things better. But what's done is done, and your brother needs help now. I know he does, I said. I opened the folder and slid the first document across the table. That's why I already helped him. My father picked it up. He read about 4 lines and then stopped. His face changed. The document was an assignment of debt, a legal record of the purchase I'd made that morning. My brother's loan, the $60,000 plus accumulated interest, had been transferred from the Florida lender to me. I was now the note holder. It was entirely legal. My attorney had reviewed every line. What is this? My father said. It means I own the debt, I said. Not them, me. My brother finally looked up. He looked confused, then alarmed, then something I couldn't quite name. Why would you do that? My mother asked. She meant it as an accusation, but it came out sounding genuinely lost. Because you came here asking me to give $60,000 to a stranger in Florida, I said. I'd rather that money stay in the family. I slid the second document across. It was a repayment agreement, structured over 5 years, monthly payments, an interest rate significantly lower than what my brother had been paying. No penalties for early repayment. I'd had my attorney draft it that way on purpose. This is what I'm offering, I said. I'm not forgiving the debt. I'm not a charity, and that wouldn't actually help anyone in the long run. But I'll hold it and I'll make the terms manageable, and your brother can pay it back over time without the Florida lender breathing down his neck. My father stared at the documents. I watched him process it. The setup, the fact that I'd known before they arrived, the fact that I'd moved first. You did this before we even asked, he said. I did it after I found out, I said. From someone who isn't in this room. So you knew we were coming. I knew my brother was in trouble, I said. I didn't know you were coming. You didn't call. You texted at 7 in the morning and said you were outside. My mother made a sound, not quite a word. My brother put his face in his hands. I want to be clear about something, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm not doing this to punish anyone. And I'm not doing this to make myself feel powerful. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. And I'm doing it on my terms, because I am the one who built something here while you all stayed away. I am the one who figured it out alone. I earned the right to decide how this goes. My father put the document down. He looked at me for a long moment. The measuring look was gone. I don't know exactly what replaced it. Something older. You've changed, he said. Yes, I said. That tends to happen. My brother picked up the repayment agreement. He read it slowly. He looked up at me, and for the first time that morning, he looked like himself, like my brother, not like someone my father had brought with him as supporting evidence. Why? He said, not defensively, just honestly, after everything. Because I'm not you, I said, and I'm not them. I know what it's like to be in trouble and need help and not have it. I don't want that for you even when I'm angry at you. I paused. And I am angry at you. That's also true. He nodded. He didn't try to fix it with words, which was the right choice. My father started to say something about the terms, something about whether there was room to discuss the timeline, and I stopped him. The terms aren't negotiable, I said. My attorney drafted them. They're fair. If your brother wants to sign, he signs. If he doesn't, the original lender still has the debt and still expects payment, just not to me. My mother looked at my father. He looked back at her. Something passed between them that I'd spent my whole childhood trying to decode. That private language that parents have. The one that always made me feel like I was on the outside of something. My brother signed, both copies. I kept one, handed him the other. Then it was quiet for a moment. The specific kind of quiet that happens when a thing has been decided and everyone knows it and nobody knows what to say next. My father stood up. He straightened his jacket. He looked around the apartment one more time, though I think this time he was looking at it differently. "I'll call you," he said to me. "You can," I said. "I'll answer, but I'd appreciate if you called because you want to talk, not because you need something." He nodded once. I don't know if it was agreement or just acknowledgement. With my father, those two things have always looked the same. My mother hugged me again on the way out. This one lasted longer, and it didn't feel like it was trying to accomplish anything. It just felt like she was tired and sad and didn't have the words. I held on for an extra second because she is still my mother and some things in me are not finished yet, no matter what I've told myself. My brother stopped at the door. "I'm sorry," he said, "for 3 years ago, for saying nothing." "I know," I said. "That's it? Just I know? What do you want me to say?" He thought about it. "I don't know. That it's okay, maybe." "It's not okay yet," I said. "But it can be, eventually. That's the most honest thing I've got right now." He nodded. He left. I closed the door and stood in the silence of my apartment for a long time. The city was bright and loud, 14 floors below, entirely indifferent to the fact that something had just shifted in my life in a way I didn't have words for yet. I picked up my coffee from the counter. It was cold. I poured it out and made a fresh cup and went back to the contract I'd been reading at 6:47 that morning, before any of this started. I had a company to run. I had a life I'd built, one deliberate decision at a time, in 3 years that nobody in my family had witnessed. The debt was documented. The terms were signed. What happened next was up to all of us. I sat down at my desk and got back to work. I still think about the look on my father's face when he picked up that document. Not the anger. I'd expected the anger. It was the moment just before it, when his eyes were moving across the page and his expression was doing that slow recalibration. The way a person looks when the story they thought they were in turns out to be a different story entirely. That's the thing nobody tells you about building a life on your own terms. The work is hard, but it's also clarifying. Every decision you make without someone else's approval teaches you something about what you actually value. Every month you pay your own rent, solve your own problems, sit with your own uncertainty. It sharpens you, not into something hard or cold, into something honest. I didn't buy my brother's debt to punish my family. I want to be clear about that because I've thought about it enough times to be sure. I did it because the alternative, handing $60,000 to a stranger in Florida while my family stood in my living room pretending the last 3 years hadn't happened, felt like a lie I wasn't willing to tell myself. I'd spent 3 years learning to stop telling that particular lie. I wasn't going to start again just because they showed up at my door. What I did took some planning. It took phone calls I didn't announce and a wire transfer I completed before sunrise and an attorney I'd been paying for 2 years to make sure I understood my options. That's not revenge. That's what it looks like when you pay attention, when you take your situation seriously enough to think 3 steps ahead instead of just reacting to whatever's in front of you. My father raised me to believe that kind of thinking was a man's domain. I'd spent 3 years proving that idea wrong, one spreadsheet at a time. There's a kind of integrity that doesn't announce itself. It just shows up in the decisions you make when nobody's watching, when you could cut a corner and nobody would know, when you could say yes just to keep the peace, when you could let something go because fighting it is expensive. I'd made a lot of those quiet decisions in 3 years. The signed repayment agreement on my coffee table was one of them. Fair terms, structured payments, a real path forward for my brother, if he wanted to take it. My mother's hug at the door, the second one, the tired one, stayed with me longer than I expected. I don't think I finished understanding what I felt in that moment. Something that wasn't forgiveness yet, but wasn't closed off either. A door left open a few inches. I put it there on purpose. That's also a decision. What I know is this: you don't get to choose what happens to you. You don't get to choose which family you're born into, or what they take from you, or how long they stay silent. What you get to choose is what you do with the years after. How carefully you move. How honestly you act. How much of yourself you protect, and how much you're still willing to offer, on your own terms, in your own time, with your eyes open. I went back to my desk that morning and finished the contract. The coffee was fresh. The city was loud. I had work to do.